Okay, I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the Tumwater School District sits on the ancestral lands of the Nisqually, Squaxin Island, and Chehalis people. I thank these caretakers of the land who have lived on and continue to live on since time immemorial. Please rise as Becky Parsons leads us in the flag salute.
Wow.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Becky. Before we begin, I would like to remind members of the public that if you wish to address the board during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to email your name and topic to Becky Powell at becky.powell@tumwater.k12.wa.us. Comments must have been submitted to Becky no later than 6 p.m. When we reach the public comment portion of the agenda, Becky will read off your name, make you a panelist if you're on Zoom so you're able to be seen and heard, and then you'll be given the opportunity to read your comment. The initial speaker on a topic will be provided 5 minutes. Additional speakers on the same topic will be allowed 3 minutes, for a total of 20 minutes on any one topic. Becky Parsons will serve as the timekeeper and will notify you when your time is up. If you do not sign up in the time and you're not able to address the board, you are welcome to email your comments to the board and or the superintendent. Everyone has the same setup, first name dot last name at tumwater.k12, k12.wa.us. Superintendent Dotson, has there been any changes or additions to the agenda since it was published?
There have not.
Okay. Is there any motions to make changes to the agenda for me and the board members?
No.
Nope.
Okay. We will now move on to the consent agenda. The board has had an opportunity to review the items on the consent agenda. I'll entertain any motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Darby?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I second it.
All in favor say aye.
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 Motion's been passed. Thank you. We'll now move on to the budget public hearing. During this time, we will hear public comment regarding the proposed budget. Each person has 5 minutes to read their statement. If there's any comments now, they'll be presented. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, so
For the budget? Yeah. So,
okay, working here. So we'll start off as we go into this and give Jennifer Carrower a chance to just kind of do a quick recap on in general and start us off with this hearing, and then have the opportunity to hear anyone who wants to make comment on the budget.
and just as a quick reminder, we're in a public hearing for the budget. And then once this part is concluded, they will then move into our regular normal meeting, and then we would have public comment for other topics outside of the agenda. Go ahead, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I will be brief. I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago, and I do want to clarify this is for the purpose of adoption of the regular 21-22 budget, as well as a budget extension for the capital projects fund for the current year. So I will just highlight a few things for purposes of public hearing. So in the general fund budget adoption, we're presenting a balanced budget for the 21 and 22 general fund, as well as all of our other transportation vehicle, debt service, ASB, and capital projects fund. And for we are also presenting our 4-year forecast, which I went over a couple weeks ago also. And just to mention that it does result in a negative fund balance at the end of 24-25. There's several assumptions that result in that decreasing fund balance, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago. And we know we can't allow that to happen, so we are doing a lot of work. We've already started the work of making...
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't really hear Jennifer.
Okay.
Hold on just a second, Melissa.
Yep. So we're going to see if we can get where you can hear Melissa.
I thought I talked
sorry, hear Jennifer.
I don't usually need a microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I was just talking about our 4-year forecast and that we have started discussions already, and we will be closely monitoring our fund balance over the next several months and year. And then I also just wanted to talk about our 21-22 budget. We have some federal stimulus funds that will help us continue to provide services to our students as we return to in-person school. And I just want to make the comment again, as I have in the past, that those are one-time funds that allow us to bring our students back to school safely and address learning loss recovery. And then for the Capital Projects Fund, we have a budget extension request for 2021. There were several projects that were delayed due to COVID-19. We underspent our expenditures by $7 million in the prior year due to those delays. And so we are starting to catch up with some of those projects this year. So we were asking for an increase of $3.745 million to our Capital Projects Fund. And we have the fund balance available to account for those expenditures. And if there's any specific questions on that, Mel is here to answer any questions. And I think with that, we'll leave it open for public comment.
I have a question real quick. Mel, would you just, since I'm, relatively new still, and I was not around for the COVID, would you mind just giving us a real brief rundown on what projects were extended due to COVID?
So there were several. The completion of Tumwater Hill Elementary, the remodel up there, that was delayed. The Tumwater Learning Center was delayed. We also had a project to re-roof the old library at Peter G. Schmidt that got delayed into this year. And we also we're purchasing furniture for Black Lake Elementary, and we originally were going to do it last summer, and that got delayed into this summer. And as well as the Tumwater High School Building C re-roof was originally slated to begin last summer, but because of COVID, we did not have time to complete, the architect didn't have time to complete the design documents in order to bid it in time. So there were several.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mel. Any other questions regarding the budget? Okay, we're still in the public hearing for the budget, as I understand, so we will now open this up to public hearing. Is that right, Sean?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if there's anyone here in the room interested in speaking regarding the budget, at this time, we can make that happen. And if there's anyone on Zoom interested in making public comment, I'll watch over here to see if anyone puts anything in the chat to say they want to comment on budget, so we can open them up as well to do so, and then see how that is. Is there anyone here interested in making comment on budget?
Okay.
Okay, for those of you out in Zoom land, is there anyone who's interested in making public comment on the budget?
Is it just Melissa by herself?
No, we have several people on Zoom tonight.
All right, good.
All right. I'm not seeing anything. I want to give people online, if they're putting a comment in, a chance to do so. Say yes, I will speak up.
Okay, last call for anyone wanting to speak up during public comment for budget. Okay, thank you. We will now move on to the public comment follow-up. Dr. Dotson, do you want to go ahead?
Certainly. So that ends our public hearing on budget. And
Correct.
so, yes, public comment follow-up. So we had several people who made public comment at our last meeting, and it was generally, as you recall, around the topic of Department of Health requirements and whether we should or should not follow those requirements. And so, based upon that, tonight you'll have that opportunity to hear from Lance Andre, our school district's attorney from Porter Foster Rorick, as well as Chris Lawrence from Propel Insurance, who will be able to provide some additional information based upon your request at the last meeting to continue to review that. And we'll have the opportunity for those who may not have had the chance to be heard at public comment to make public comment tonight in that. So I want to make sure you've had the chance to hear from everyone interested in speaking. So.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dotson. Okay, we will move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. Just as a reminder, before we begin with public comments, Becky Parsons will call on each person that submitted their name in topic by 6 p.m. via email, allowing the opportunity to read their statement. The first submission on a topic will receive 5 minutes. Every submission after the same topic will receive 3 minutes for a total of 20 minutes for any one topic. Becky Parsons will serve as the timekeeper and will inform the speaker when their time is up. We try to give you a warning if we can. The board does not discuss personnel matters or matters involving student discipline in open meetings, such as matters are only addressed in an executive session. Concerns about such matters should be first addressed with the superintendent or a designatee, who will then, when appropriate, inform and involve the board. The board will likely not respond as at this time for us to hear your issue. Please note that all submissions will be shared with the board and superintendent. Upon hearing your comment, the board will take it under advisement and will, as needed, ask the appropriate staff members to follow up with you. Becky, did you receive any submissions online or in person for public comment?
Yes.
Go ahead and.
Received 4 submissions for 2 different topics. So we're going to start with Tara Kimbrough.
Thank you,
Tara
Becky.
Kimbrell? Kimbrell. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Tara Kimbrough. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, I can start your time.
Okay, I'm good. Good evening. As you all said, I'm Tara Kimbrough, a very concerned mom of 2, a lifelong Tumwater resident, and a graduate from Tumwater High School. For those that think that the government has our best interests in mind, solely based on science and data, I would just like to tell you a little story tonight. For the last 18 months, I was the Facilities and Safety Director for a large state agency. I was responsible for ensuring our offices, employees, and customers were safe from COVID exposure. Let me tell you, it was not a fun job. In May, I was asked to create and champion a mask exemption process. So essentially, this is a process to allow vaccinated employees to remove their masks while maintaining masking and social distancing requirements for those who are unvaccinated. What I now know is that this was the dry run for vaccine mandates. Logically, I asked, why can't we just leave the masks on for everyone until we can all take them off? And citing my concerns about employee morale, mental health, and treating factions of our employees differently based on their vaccination status. Also at that time, there was no proof that the vaccines prevented transmission. We now know they reduce it, but they do not stop it. Additionally, creating such a process when everyone could just keep their masks on, in my opinion, wasted state resources. So after consulting with the AG and all top leadership, I was told our governor wanted to incentivize vaccination. So despite the knowledge and awareness of possible risks that I detailed, and both the physical and mental, from both the physical and mental perspective, I was asked to not put any of it in writing and to proceed. Jay Inslee demanded it, and I said no. Yesterday was my last day with the state after 13 and a half years. I decided to resign in July. I refuse to sit by idly as the state pretends to care about your health and well-being while playing games with masks, purposefully limiting vaccine exemptions required by federal law, denying people's unemployment, and firing people for a condition of employment illegally added under the guise of an emergency. After the vaccine mandate was released, agencies were directed to limit conversations about it as much as possible and do not discuss the legality. What? You just told people that you would be firing them if they did not take a vaccine, and yet we shouldn't be allowed them the opportunity to ask questions or provide justification for its existence? That seems a bit nefarious, if you ask me. Now, what does this have to do with our schools, you're probably thinking? I know what is next, and so do you. As soon as the vaccine is approved for children 5 through 11, kids will be required to be vaccinated for COVID to attend public school. Our governor will deny your children the right to an education, just like he denies you the right to a job. By the time it's released for emergency authorization, each vaccine will have been tested on roughly 4,500 kids. Let me repeat that, 4,500 kids before it could get to a point where he's saying everyone has to have it. A lot of parents will weigh those risks and benefits prior to vaccinating their children, and in many cases, parents will choose to wait, citing low risk of severe illness and maybe, no long-term data on the risks. This is unethical. I know many parents are pulling their kids from public schools right now for a variety of reasons on both ends of the spectrum. I'm sure the school district has fears they won't have enough funding to sustain, they won't have enough kids to sustain funding. Just wait until the vaccines are mandated for attendance. And you know what? You might be thinking, I don't agree with this lady, and I respect that. You may be thinking, I love our governor and I love what he's doing. I'm content in the sweet embrace of our government and the sense of security he's providing me. And that's great, so let's find some common ground. We can all agree that every single child in this district matters. Every single child deserves equal access to public education. And this is what you, the board, were elected for, and our tax dollars demand it. I'm pleading with you. And I'm saying this to prepare you for battle for all of our kids. I was told for months at work, we would never require you to get vaccinated to come in. And look where we are today. So stand up. Enough is enough. No more mandates. It does not have to be this way. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Tara. Becky, do you have our next speaker? Sure. No problem.
So next we have Courtney Williams, who is speaking to COVID protocols, and so she'll have 3 minutes on that topic. We'll set our timer. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah. Okay. I'm up here today because I would like some clarification on some of the guidelines set forth for Washington Public Schools. Right now, to my understanding, with the current COVID safety protocols in Washington State, all children in a classroom are going to be sent home and expected to quarantine every time one classmate tests positive or shows symptoms. And kids won't be allowed back to class until after the quarantine period unless they test negative, or if they have the vaccine, they won't have to test. So you're telling me every single time a child runs a fever or has a seasonal allergy or the common cold, they will be sent home along with all of their classmates and expected to quarantine, then get the swab jabbed up their nose every single time? Except for the youth who get the vaccine. They'll be allowed back in school without needing to quarantine or take the test. Like I said, is this correct? This is just my understanding. And what exactly do symptoms include? And furthermore, how is this affecting our children and youth psychologically? Learning to be afraid of anyone who has a slight cough, being afraid of getting sick because then they'll get kicked out of school and all of their peers will blame them. That makes me absolutely sick, and it's the exact reason why I've already decided and finalized my intent to withdraw from Tumwater Public Schools. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, just another student gone. But last summer, my daughter, who is now going into 6th grade, volunteered at Tumwater High School to hand out sack lunches during her summer vacation. She even got recognized at a Zoom board meeting for that. So that's the kind of student you guys are losing. I have been a licensed childcare provider since 2012, and I have experience teaching my children along with about 100 other children preschool and kindergarten readiness. I have absolutely no hesitance that I can homeschool. I've looked into it, and there are a multitude of resources for parents. So parents, whether you are in person or watching on YouTube live stream, if this is an option that has crossed your mind and it is something your family can afford but you don't know where to start, come find me. Look me up. Courtney Williams, I will help you. We can do it together. It takes a village. Our kids deserve to be kids. They should not be forced, coerced, bribed, or incentivized into a public education. They deserve to play together, to smile at each other. This new normal is not normal, and my family and I refuse to participate in mandates and guidelines that are immoral and unethical. Board members, staff, and parents, what is it going to take for you to realize that these forceful mandates are wrong? Currently, our government is threatening the livelihood of our teachers and staff. This is unethical. Teachers, Tumwater families stood behind you when you took a strike a couple of years ago, and we will stand behind you again to fight for your medical freedom. I'm scared to think of what's coming next, but I think we all know. Masks for everyone, except for the students and staff who are vaccinated. Segregation at its finest. Are you waiting for that day to come before you finally stand up and say, I don't believe this is right?
Thank you, Courtney.
Next we have Dave Morris. He's on Zoom, so let me just promote him. And he's speaking to the same topic, so he has 3 minutes.
Make sure this down.
Dave.
mask if you're hearing us, so that if you choose to use camera, you can. There you are.
There I am.
Very good.
Okay, are you ready, Dave?
Oh.
Okay. Oh, can you hear? Okay, I'm gonna start your time now.
First of all, I wanted to start and say I really appreciate everybody in the room and on Zoom who's taking time, like I am, away from being with their children to be here advocating for their education. I appreciate everybody and the time that you put in the school board and people who I may feel are horribly mistaken, but certainly care. My wife's an emergency room nurse, and she's seen a significant uptick in COVID cases among kids. We didn't have a positive case that I'm aware of last spring, but I think it would be foolish to count on luck again this year. I'm going to do everybody one other solid and get done here in well under 3 minutes. First of all, I'd like to make sure you hear from the other residents of Tumwater who send their students to Tumwater schools and are committed to attending. We support the state mask mandate, and we certainly expect the Tumwater School Board to use its moral authority and our resources that we pay to enforce the state health policies, especially when they're consistent with CDC and WHO recommendations. It shouldn't be the responsibility of parents who want to follow the law to withdraw from the public school system to do it. And I have a series of questions that I am waiting for answers to. One of them is, what are we going to do to support teachers and make sure that mask mandates are enforced and that kids do, in fact, wear masks? How are we going to handle social distancing at lunch when kids are not masked? And they can't be. Are we going to be doing HEPA filters and things like that like they do in the Olympia public schools evidently? Finally, I'd like to share the concern that the first parent talked about. What is our plan for reporting and tracking cases as they come? Sooner or later, a parent is going to send a sick kid to school. I started out as a kindergarten teacher 1 million years ago, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and it happened then, and it's going to happen today. What kind of accountability is there? What's the reporting strategy? Where's the transparency? How do we know that when a sick kid is identified in school and there's reason to be concerned and there's reason to quarantine, how do we know that we're going to be notified and that is going to take place? Finally, what's the plan to make sure that students who are in quarantine, which seems inevitable, will be able to continue learning? I'd hate to see us in a situation where for a second year in a row, we end up making it up as we go along when the problems that we're going to have to face, while they're difficult, they're predictable. Last year, as cases rose beyond the standard that we set,
Dave,
where
can
we
you
said,
hear
look,
us?
if cases go beyond here, we're going to reopen, we blew past them. Is that the plan? And we didn't close back up. Is that the plan again? I understand that the answers to these questions are challenging, but we don't have an option but to meet.
Type in the chat.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have Catherine Sailors.
Okay.
Can I ask real quickly? I'm sorry, I didn't get the young woman's name who spoke second.
I'm Courtney.
Courtney. Was that N-E-Y, Courtney?
Nope, an E-E.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
you. Catherine, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Right. So she's gonna wanna share her screen.
So did we promote her as a panelist?
Yes.
Okay, let me make sure that you can share your screen.
It says I can share screen. I'm not going to share quite yet, but I will in just a minute.
Okay, perfect. It looks, yep, you got that setting on. Perfect.
So Catherine is signed up to speak about.
Okay.
So for 5 minutes.
All right, you guys ready?
Great. Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay. So as we go into another year of COVID, I think that it's important, but we've had many years of equity challenges in Tumwater, so I'm focusing on that tonight. It is vital that Tumwater School District practices inclusive hiring. Inclusive hiring practices will help Tumwater School District hire diverse staff. Some ways to be inclusive are to have larger font to include job descriptions instead of requirements. Do not use gendered language. Have the job description available in a variety of languages. Adhere to web content accessibility guidelines. To be clear about inclusion goals, as well as diversity in Tumwater School District as of now. And when hiring, having a diverse interview panel. I know that this is being worked on. However, it is important that Tumwater School District continues to work on being inclusive. It is important for our students as well as our community and systematic discrimination. To stop discrimination, we know that we need to make changes to the very systems that put them in place, such as hiring procedures. I would like to share some data from Tumwater School District. So I will share my screen now. And this is our OSPI. I'm just going to be sharing the disciplinary and our enrollment. So this is our enrollment screen right here, our report. And you can see that down here we're at 72% white, 8.5 two or more races, 17% Hispanic, and 1% so you can see all of those here. And then we can click over to our disciplinary. So keeping this in mind, and then seeing where our disciplinary is. So we have 2 or more races being disciplined at almost twice the rate as our white students, even though we know that we do not have, that they're not the same as attending. And this is something that is just showing there's a disproportionate rate of discipline on BIPOC students. Many of you know me from, many of the board members know my story and know I've been involved with the equity work in the district. I have a biracial son in the district that has experienced many ignorant and racist comments every day when he was in in-person school. In 2019, I met with the principal in his school, and even though my son didn't want me to, his mental and emotional health was greatly affected by everything going on at school, so I felt like I didn't have another choice. We ended up changing school districts. A few of the main kids had just not been attending the school anymore, so he came back to school right before COVID. However, him and I know other students that are not returning to in-person school, not only because of COVID, but due to the fear of the social climate in Tumwater School District right now, specifically around racism and racial equity. We know from our Tumwater School District data that our BIPOC students are not returning to in-person school as much as our white students. And that is just something, and that is pretty much statewide. These concerns are not unique to Tumwater School District. You can see these report cards all over the state. And I do also want to thank the district for the equity work that they have been doing. And the data that I pulled is right on the equity, diversity, and inclusion tab in Tumwater School District, and about the hire that we hired for the DEI position, and now we aren't able to hire anyone new. I just want to know that I want to say that push going forward that we will be able to hire that position as soon as possible, because the weight load of all the equity work in Tumwater is too much for somebody to handle that doesn't have the time to dedicate to that position. And I know there's many parents that have been voicing their their ideals on masks. And I would just like to say that I support the district using masks, and I'm really fearful for our kids moving forward that will be attending in-person school, especially those not vaccinated due to the hospitalization of most COVID patients are not vaccinated. And along with other parents, I'm curious how you guys are going to be handling keeping kids safe at school. And thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, we are done with public comments at this time. We will now move on to the reports to the board. Sean Dotson will present on the DOH requirements and the follow-up discussion from our last meeting.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and take a minute just to put information up here, but DOH requirements. So we're sitting, let's see, we're at 6:30. I'm going to take a look and see if we have any of our presenters on right now. Yep. Okay.
I thought I saw Lance on there.
Oh, yes. Okay. We do. So as you know, I'll go ahead and promote Lance in here in just a moment. And so as you know, at our last meeting, we had some discussion. We decided to bring our attorney and someone from our risk management pool to the table to have some discussion, share some information, and help us better understand what our authority is in relation to these guidelines. So Lance has joined us. Lance, I'm going to move you up to panelist, and then do we have? I'm not seeing on the attendees right now. Oh, there's one. Good evening, Lance. I think we have you on our panel now, so hopefully you should be able to join us. There you are. Good evening.
Good evening.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. So, Lance, as we spoke, I shared the board was seeking some guidance regarding the law and the board's authority related to mask requirements, DOH guidelines and requirements, and where that resides. And I know wanted to give you the opportunity to share some information, have the board ask any questions they have regarding that, so we can make sure that we have clear understanding. So, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and I was able to hear some of the public comments on these issues, and I think the comments I heard were mostly related to the vaccine issue, and the memo that I provided to the board really focused on questions that had been raised around the mask mandate from the state. So I'd rather answer questions that the board has than the ones that I'm assuming they might have, but I can go over some of the frequently asked questions that were addressed in the memo.
Hey, Lance, I have a board member who wanted to just go ahead.
Just real quickly, Lance, could you just say your whole name, what your title is, and what you do for the district, please?
Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Lance Andrea. I'm an attorney with a law firm called Porter Foster Rorick. We're in Seattle, Washington. Our practice is exclusively serving public school districts throughout the state of Washington. And so I've been doing that for since 2003. And so I represent the Tumwater School District as both general legal counsel and for labor relations and things of that nature. And I also represent a number of other public schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Lance.
So one of the questions that's come up frequently around the mask mandate is where does the authority come from? Does the governor or the Department of Health have authority to issue these mandates to public schools? There are several legal sources, and I've outlined those in a frequently asked questions document for the board. But the short answer is yes. There's statutes that are passed by the state legislature empowering, during a state of emergency that's been declared by the governor at this point, empowering the governor and empowering the Department of Health, the State Department of Health and local departments of health to take necessary steps to stop the spread of infectious diseases. And so that's the situation we're in right now, where these mandates do have the authority of law. The usual means of enforcement for that is set forth in the statute anyways, is actually a criminal penalty. It's a gross misdemeanor for anyone to violate the governor's mandates during a state of emergency. It is a what we call a simple misdemeanor, or just a regular misdemeanor to violate the mandate of the State Department of Health or a local health authority. And so there's a clear statutory basis, and it's not, optional. With regard to another question that often comes up is there's a statute called RCW 28A320.015 that a lot of folks have been talking about lately around this question of the mask mandate. It grants school districts broad discretionary authority to adopt policies that further the goals of the district. And one of the questions that's been raised, and there's been some things posted on social media by politicians and things like that, questioning whether school districts could, under that authority, adopt a policy. And then if we have a policy, does that then supersede the mask mandates from the governor or from the Department of Health? The short answer again is no. Public school districts only have such authority as they're granted by statute and by the Constitution. And that one RCW gives us authority to do things that will further the educational goals of the district, but only to the extent consistent with other laws. And those other laws that I've just talked about clearly require everyone to obey these mandates during a public health emergency. And so it would not be prudent and something I would advise for a school board to adopt a policy that purports to adopt a different mask policy than has been set by the state. It's just not something we have the authority to do. And I hear a lot of concern and points being made by people who don't agree with that policy. And what I say is the comments that we're hearing, they really need to go to the state, because the state is where this policy is set. And I feel quite a bit of, concern for the school boards of the state right now that are getting a lot of pressure put on them to do something that they just simply don't have the legal authority to do. And so it's important that people understand that that's where those comments really should be directed. Does OSPI have authority to withhold funding if a school district chooses to disregard the order? That's another question that comes up very often. The Superintendent of Public Instruction has said that he will withhold funds from school districts that don't abide by these mandates. That's a question that has not been well settled in the law, and I will, not stand here and say that it's absolutely 100% certain that that would be one of the consequences that could be imposed. There's a process that would need to happen, at least, for that to happen, and it's not clear exactly what that process would be. But what we can say is that there could be other consequences, including the fact that there's these criminal penalties out there that so far there has not been a lot of enforcement of, but they are there in the law. Finally, a question often comes up about constitutional rights. What have the courts said about the constitutional right not to wear a mask? Isn't there a freedom that goes along with that? And yes, generally speaking, the government doesn't get to tell us what to wear, right? And so in normal times, when we don't have a state of emergency and a pandemic, the government would have very limited authority to tell us what to wear from one day to the other. But during a state of emergency, courts have repeatedly said during pandemics that states do have broad authority to do what it takes to sort of stop the spread of infectious diseases. And the case that I cited in the memo, it's from 1905, but it's never been reversed by the Supreme Court, actually upheld mandatory vaccines for the general public during the smallpox epidemic in 1905. And so that case has been cited repeatedly and quite recently by a number of courts that have upheld similar mask mandates in other states. and other pretty extreme measures that governments have had to take in order to try to stop the pandemic. Doesn't mean that those decisions are all right or wrong. You know, the courts don't get into whether or not it's good policy. What they get into is whether the authority is there for the executive, the governor, to make those decisions. And the courts have repeatedly said that that's something that they leave to the executive. If you don't like the way the governor is handling the pandemic, the remedy is not to go to court, but to vote him out of office. And so that's what the courts have basically said. And I'm not trying to make a comment, you know, pro or con with what the governor's doing. I'm just saying that's what the courts have said the remedy is. It's a political remedy, not a remedy in court, and not something where there's a constitutional violation that's occurred. So in conclusion, you know, we hear a lot of concern about the mask mandates, and you know, again, it's appropriate to bring those concerns to the state government, and people certainly have a right to express their concern about it during school board meetings as well. But in terms of what the school board has the authority to do, my analysis and the analysis of every attorney that I've talked to on this is that it is not within our authority to defy those mandates. I'll take questions from the board at this point if there are any.
Any questions from the board? I have two. I don't want to take up all Lance's time though. So I have two kind of topics areas, Lance. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Great. So the first one I want to touch on is the emergency order. This is the same emergency order that was enacted by the governor himself early last year in 2020. Is that correct? And we are still, that's the same law that is essentially binding us to every order. Is that correct?
There was an initial order and it has been extended a number of times. None of us hoped the pandemic would last this long. And then finally, a few months ago, and I'm sorry, I don't have all the dates of all those orders with me. And if anyone has all those memorized, my hat is off to them. But finally, after, you know, kind of some serial extensions, there was a legislative decision made to go ahead and extend those indefinitely. And so, yes, we're still under not the first order, but kind of the last order that was issued before that legislative act was made to extend that. And the state of emergency that's been declared by the governor continues to be in place.
Yeah, it was January 22nd. So that order can only be changed by legislature. That is correct. We would have to have session and law that would either limit or restrict that before it could be changed at all, and the only one that can lift that is the governor himself. Is that correct?
I think what I heard is the state of emergency was a question whether or not only the governor can lift the state of emergency.
Yes, I know we can do it by legislature, I assume, but the governor, yeah, that is, correct. That's the question.
Well, certainly the school board doesn't have the authority to lift it.
No.
The question of whether or not the legislature could reverse it is a separate question. And you know, there are procedures certainly that the legislature could go through, and then there would be a, you know, basically a separation of powers issue at the state level between the executive's, you know, sort of authority and the legislature's authority. It's kind of not within the scope of, you know, my analysis of this situation. So, but, you know, I'm really focusing on the school board's authority at this point. And that is clearly not there.
Great, thank you, Lance. I'll go on to the second topic then real quick. So we know that essentially the board can't go against or change or, you know, go against any mandates. Do we have the ability to enhance those or make those, let's say, stronger or better or safer or more economical for the district and the students or the kids?
Yes, within reasonable limits, right? We know that we have a duty to educate all children, you know, within our boundaries, and so anything that would exclude people, we'd be limited by that. We know that we, probably would have some constitutional limits on the district's authority, and actions that are beyond the governor's authority. But for example, a school district that wants to mandate that employees wear masks in areas that the state might not otherwise mandate, in order to be safe and to stop, to be extra careful about the spread of any infectious diseases outside the context of the public school program, would have the authority to do that. Those rules can sometimes trigger bargaining obligations with employee groups and things like that. So there can be legal ramifications when we act above and beyond what the state has told us to do. But yes, there's authority to be more careful than the state has required.
If we focus that just on the kids and the students, would we have to bargain that if we made the kids more safe by enhancing these requirements? Would we have to bargain that?
Not necessarily. It would depend on the specific type of change that was made, and I would suggest that would probably want to be something that where the discussion would happen at the administrative level, and have some privileged advice of legal counsel about specific pros and cons of things that might be considered. I heard some discussion, for example, about kids and whether kids without vaccinations might be excluded. And at this point, there's no right to exclude students who are not vaccinated from public schools. So that's another decision that is not within the authority of the school district. We have to take kids as they come to us. If they're not vaccinated, we still educate them and we enforce other safety measures, mask requirements. The state does have mandatory vaccination laws for certain types of vaccinations and exemptions from those for sincerely held religious beliefs, health issues that kids have, measles, etc. And it's possible that at some point COVID-19 vaccines will get added to that list of things that we have to have parents do. That has not happened yet, and there's no legislation pending to have that happen. So that would be an example of a situation where we really don't have the authority to impose extra requirements around attendance, for example.
Thank you, Lance. Okay. Any more questions from the board?
Nope, just thank you, Lance. Thank you for being so thorough in your report to us.
Thank you very much for being here.
Everyone, I think I just hit the mute button.
Oh, the joys of Zoom.
And you can see as I look at our list of attendees, I don't know if I'm not sure that we have Chris Lawrence on there. Chris, if you're in the attendees, could you give me a note in the chat so I can promote you to panelist? Join us, or we have someone from Propel Insurance.
Oh, yeah.
We may not have them on the Zoom at this time.
Was he expected to be on here?
My understanding is we were going to have them on there, and I'm wondering if something happened, because we don't have them on the panel at this, or on the attendee list at this time.
We're a touch early. We are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can keep an eye out and see if they jump on in a few minutes. We could always go ahead and get into our policies that we have up, and we can check back and see if we've got that opportunity to bring them onto the panel in a few minutes.
Okay, let's move on to, we'll move back to reports to the board, but we'll move on to action items. Sean Bastone, present policy 4111, school safety and security services program. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, your second reading for three policies, 4311, 3207, and 3241. 4311 concerning school safety and security services, 3207, the prohibition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and 3241, which is student discipline. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that first read and the notations and summaries of those places that we made recommendations for based on WASDA policy. And so we'd like to open up or ask if you have any specific questions with regards to the second reading that we may want to take into consideration.
Are you asking for questions on all policies?
Correct.
All
I'm
policies.
ready.
So this is 4311, 3207, and 3241. Is that correct?
Correct. 3207, the prohibition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. 3241, student discipline.
So I do have a question or a topic from 3207.
Okay.
Wanted to discuss about adding vaccination status to that category and getting the thoughts from, well, probably both Sean's, and see if we think that's already covered in there, or if we feel we need to add that in specifically.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. If you take a look at the first paragraph of the policy 3207, one of the things that's often true about policies is you can't always account for every situation that would come up. So many times in the law with regards to policy, they will make a distinction or they will make a statement that says, hey, for example, in this one, this is not limited to or motivated by race, color, religion, ancestry. So that list could go really on and on. So what this has is these are federally protected classes, right? And this last statement here, mental, physical disability, or other distinguishing characteristics. So if somebody was being bullied, harassed, or intimidated because of their vaccination status, this sentence right here says we would need to respond. It wouldn't be okay for a student to come to school and be teased about their vaccination or non-vaccination status. And if that was happening, we would want to follow the process just the same as we would in any other situation. Yeah, that's a great question because it can't be exhaustive. It has to say, hey, look, here's another vaccination would be another distinguishing characteristic that we would be mandated to address.
And I
That's
just
a great
want to
question.
clarify, this policy covers students as well as staff as well, correct?
Yes, you know, and many times bullying, harassment, intimidation in the workplace is addressed across the school district. There's also school safety for staff in the workplace as well, though, too.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions? That was a good question. I took the best question.
Well, that's
That's
an important distinction, so thank you.
Does that include the kids being separated after that?
So I'll do this. I would like to make a motion to discuss a separate new policy to address vaccination status in the way we address it in our quarantine guidance from the department or from our local county health officer. And it is just a discussion and it would take place after the action items. Can we do that, Sean, if I make that motion and it is seconded?
Maybe I need a little more clarification. Is it to have discussion about
creating a new policy?
Creating a new policy. So generally, that would be done as that would be an amendment to the agenda, and so would need to be approved by the board to amend the agenda. Otherwise you can't. It is something we can do even between meetings in terms of putting together policy, a proposed policy if there were something. But if you want to have a discussion about that in this, you can. You would need board approval to amend agenda.
So I think, yeah, I would. So then I would ask, do I need approval or a second?
You would need a second and a board vote.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to discuss a new policy and not pass it, but just to discuss a new policy after our action items here around quarantine status and the way the Thurston County Health Officer has directed us.
Casey, one of the recommendations on that may be to have a discussion about what you believe that policy requirement might look like and then to formulate the policy in light of having feedback from everybody, and then bring it to the public meeting in a draft form so that folks could make some comment on it. Yeah, because sometimes we need to know well, you just heard Lance, right? Sometimes there are some legal things that we would want to make sure and vet with our school attorneys and or WASDA and or governing bodies that kind of say, if we go here, is this okay? So it might be to start the conversation with a policy outline, come back and present that at a public meeting, and then invite comment back for folks to reflect on it. Because I would want you to be in a place where you had all the information you needed before that discussion, so we could guide the discussion based on what's legal or not.
Casey, would you want that done like prior to our next meeting, or would you want that to be the topic of one of our work sessions?
I would like it to be before our next meeting, but I like Sean's approach of
I like that
having,
too.
I think we know, he has an idea, and if we're okay with that, then they would present it and then we can discuss it. I just wanted to discuss it to see if there's interest first before having Sean go, but if we're okay with that, definitely let's have Sean go with it. It sounds like we're okay, so we will move in that direction, Sean. And our next meeting, whenever that is, that's okay. I'm okay with that, yes, definitely. Perfect. Thank you, Sean.
As well.
All right.
Okay.
Back to our normal board meeting.
So then that would be a first reading.
This is the second reading of all. His would be the first, right?
Okay.
Now we'll go back to our board meeting with our second reading on policy.
You would bring it forth after having all the feedback, allow public comment on that, and talk about and dialogue about what it says and offers the school district, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I will entertain, Dr. Dotson, do we need to do these one at a time, or can we do all three?
Generally, you do an
One at a
individual vote on each.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 4311, School Safety and Security Services Program as presented. Darby, did you want to?
I move that we approve policy 4311, School Safety and Security Services Program.
I will second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is passed. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 3207, Prohibition and Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying as presented. Lori, did you want to do anything?
Sure. I will make a motion to approve policy 3207, Prohibition of Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion's passed. And lastly, policy 3241. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 3241, student discipline as presented.
I move that we accept policy 3241, student discipline.
I will second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is passed. Thank you, Sean.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. All right. Now for the best part. Jennifer will present on resolution 02-2122, the budget adoption of the 21-22 school year, and resolution 02-2021 capital project budget extension 2021 school year. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I think you just presented for me, but thank you. So I am presenting
That
the
is the
resolution.
mouthful. I stole it.
I am presenting the resolution for the adoption of the Capital Projects Fund Budget Extension 08-2021, and to present the resolution 02-2122 for adopting the regular budget.
One at a time again, Sean, is that right? All right. Is there a motion to approve resolution 02-2122?
I'll move to approve resolution 02-2122, budget adoption 21-22.
I second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion is passed. And then I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 08-2021, the capital budget extension 2021 school year.
I will move to make a motion to approve resolution 08-2021, capital projects budget extension 2021 school year.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion is passed. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank
We will now move on to the superintendent report. Go ahead, Dr. Dotson.
You bet. I'm going to check one more time just to see, do we have anyone from Propel Insurance or SIAW on our Zoom call? It does not appear so. So if we have further questions for them, I will need to see about bringing them to our next meeting or getting them in connection with those who have individual questions for that. So sorry about that, and we'll move forward. So let me pull up my PowerPoint.
What's the insurance gentleman's name?
Chris Lawrence is her name.
Her name, excuse me.
Yeah. So I have one by the numbers for you here that I'll take you to, and it's a brief one, just because I think it's kind of a nice. Tells us a little about what we've got going. And the number that I'll give you is 6, and it's a simple one, but.
6 days till school.
That should have been the one, honestly, because we are about there and getting awfully close. But the number I put in, and I usually use that one here, that's 6 community members that did share some written feedback for you as well. And so I sent that the other night. We had 5 people who commented on budget, 1 who commented on our policies, and I really want to just say in this forum, I appreciate the people taking time to review those documents and provide feedback. There was some really thoughtful responses there. Had the chance to share that with you, and I think that just tells us that that is a tool where we can get some feedback that maybe we wouldn't otherwise have. And so hoping to continue to grow that and build on it. I know that's not a large number, but that is 6 people who were able to take a look and come back and say to us in our community, either yes, I'm in favor of this, or here's my concerns or directions they'd like to share. And so we'll continue to build from that to make sure we're getting good feedback on policies. So I'll continue to show this for the time being. This is the state of Washington's COVID update, and I just share with you just because it tells us where we are. We continue to be on an increase as a state. And then if we go to, we're at about equal to the highest peak that we had last winter. And then in Thurston County, because we've actually done a better job in Thurston County than the statewide data over this pandemic, we still are below the statewide number, but this is the highest peak we've experienced, where the state's kind of at about the same place we were last winter. This is the highest peak we've experienced in Thurston County. And with that, we get some questions from people saying, hey, on one side we have those questions about, do we need to follow all of these requirements? On the other side, I'm receiving feedback from people saying, should we be open full in person? And I can tell you, my response to that has been, per the executive order, we will be open 5 days a week. And I know some people are feeling like, gosh, almost we're back to where we started. But one thing that I've been also sharing is that we're not exactly back to where we started. We have something now we didn't have a year ago, and that is a year of additional information to help inform our efforts. And that's super important. For example, if we go back to about this time last summer, we still didn't know much about surface transmission, and we were doing a lot of things that, and we've learned in this last year, some of the measures we took weren't necessarily the perfect measures, but we've now refined further based upon the science about what helps us mitigate spread in our schools. And we've had a lot of success. And I share this with you. Something I shared a while back is that our approach to keeping the spread down in our schools is to use what we call that Swiss cheese approach. There's a variety of mitigation measures, none of which are perfect. But when you put them together, they help us reduce the spread in our schools. And that has proven to, in school settings, keep the spread substantially lower than what the spread is in a community, even when spread is at a fairly high level. And that's one of the things that causes us really to take a different approach this year and come back in person, in addition to the fact that we know what that long-term social isolation, how hard that is on our kids. And so when we put those things together, that is what's behind our decision to go forward. And so with physical distancing, with masks, having kids wash hands frequently, improving our ventilation, which we've done. We have an excellent contact tracing team in our schools. We will continue cleaning and disinfection of high-touch surfaces. And while we won't have health screenings at the door, we're not going to do the temperature checks because we learned that wasn't that wasn't an effective way for us to really identify students who might be coming into the school with COVID. That wasn't helping us significantly in that area. We are going to continue to emphasize the important measure of parents checking kids for symptoms before and keeping them home if they're sick. And we will continue to if there is a student that we see who is experiencing symptoms, removing them right away, getting them to a place where they're safe, getting them a safe ride home so that they can get healthy and come back. And so, and then we have testing. We do have testing available through ESD 113. We have a drive-through site that continues to be available for families who wish to get. So if there's an exposure, that they are able to undergo testing. And we did have some questions tonight that were posed that are really good ones about what are our plans for students to. So, for example, I heard, what's the plan for reporting and tracking cases? We work with the county health department on that, and our nurses are in constant contact with them. So when there is a case, it's reported to county health. County health engages in contact tracing. We have data, including seating charts for classes, everything we need to know who might have been exposed if there is an incident in the school. And we've been successfully doing that over the last year while our students were in. We have those plans in place. There's a communication plan that's in place with Thurston County Public Health. I just met with them the other day on Wednesday, and they've updated it with the latest information on what are the requirements as to who would have to be quarantined in a situation, who might have to test in a situation. They've shifted the guidance to where a close contact last year, while students could sit 3 feet spaced, a close contact last year was 6 feet. So if I was sitting inside that 6 foot window, if we could only have kids 3 feet apart or 3.5 feet apart in a classroom, anyone inside that 6 foot window was considered a close contact and had to quarantine if exposed to a student who was COVID positive. Now this year they've adjusted that, so it now matches. It's 3 feet. If students are separated by 3 feet, they are not considered a close contact and don't have to quarantine. So that certainly helps us in that. There is a strong recommendation that students sitting inside 6 feet still get tested 3 to 5 days later. If a student is COVID positive, and if someone was sitting within 6 feet of that person masked in a classroom for over 15 minutes, they would recommend testing. If they're inside 3 feet for that 15 minutes, now they would need to quarantine as a close contact. So the guidance is shifted, and we're just getting all of that clear, and that will be communicated out to parents as part of our safe start plan. We did that last year. We had a document we sent out to parents that had, here's what it's going to look like. I just recorded a video the other day. We used a video last year as we brought kids back to help them say, what's it going to look like at school? So that video's been recorded. It's in editing right now, and thank you, Aaron, for helping us with that shoot. And then Lori's working on those documents to go out to parents so they have the information to know what is it we're doing. But as with everything during COVID we've continued to gather information and make sure that what we put out to people is current when school starts, which means if we do it too far ahead, it's less likely to be current because of the dynamic nature of this virus. And so we've been watching, gathering information, making sure we've got accurate, and then we're going to start putting out those communications to people so they have the answers to a number of these questions. And plan for students in quarantine. We're actually developing a menu of options for teachers because the same.
Can I just want to pop in real quickly?
Yes.
Just want to say thank you also to Lori Wiedemeyer sitting back there for all of her work with communication. And that's just what I want to speak about just real quickly. Yeah. Communication is just super important right now. And I would like to also just emphasize that many families, the information they get from their school is the information that they look to. Mm-hmm. It's maybe the only source that they get information from about what's going on with the health emergency and whatnot. So I just want to really stress that whatever we're doing to send home to parents, we want to also make sure it's available on the website, because you cannot over communicate these things. And I'm hearing from many families, parents, grandparents, even just community members in general who are worried about spread and what's going to be happening with the schools. So I just think it really behooves the district to do as much communication as possible through every avenue that we have to try to answer as many questions as possible so people and parents and community members feel safe about sending their kids back to school.
I had a quick, but I don't want to steal your slide if you have it coming up, Sean.
No,
But I
go
wanted to talk about how kind of the information flows. That we follow the DOH guidelines, but the Thurston County Health Officer decides the decision tree as far as quarantine. Is that correct? And DOH takes CDC into consideration, but we don't follow the CDC. We follow DOH. And then the Thurston County Health Officer's decision tree, unless we have a policy that would supersede that. Is that?
Yes, in general, that's correct. So it's, Department of Health sets the general guidelines for the state. The county health officer actually has some power within those guidelines to even add to them or enhance them or adjust them based upon needs in the county. So the county health officer actually has substantial power. They have the power to close schools, so in Thurston County, for example, that strong recommendation of getting testing 3 to 5 days later if you're inside 6 feet is a county based upon current conditions. And so there are some of those adjustments that are made at the county level from the DOH requirements.
And just real quick, we do have testing available for our students. Is that correct?
We do.
At ESD, and we do, and that is free? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, free
Just wanna make
testing
sure
site. Yeah, anyone can, it's recommended you get an appointment. You can get an appointment on our website. People can also drive in and drive in. It's helpful to have an appointment because it helps them keep the flow of traffic. So, any other questions at this point on that? So, and that will include, as we talk about lunch plans is that's really complicated because the ideal when students have masks off, as we've heard, would be if we could have students 6 feet apart. The challenge is that's not entirely practical in a school setting where you have as many students as we do who are going to be doing that. So each school is working on what their best plan is. Some are, if they're less apart, fewer feet apart, of course, good air filtration is important. For us, it's also the amount of time students are in proximity, encouraging them to eat and move and get out of there so that we have a shorter span of time where kids might be at less than 6 feet. Our challenges are space, furnishings, and supervision. When you're talking about number of kids, we're just not designed or organized to be able to have all students at 6 feet. When we were in hybrid, that was challenging, and it's even more challenging with all of our students back 5 days a week. So as you look at the DOH requirements and guidance, what they basically say is they say, do this to the best of your ability, but prioritize having kids in school because and so we have principals working to make for the most creative solutions they can to provide as much space as possible, to have the plans that put students in the best position possible, but 6 feet of physical distance is going to be, in most of our schools, not possible at that lunchtime, and that is one of our challenges, and not a challenge that's unique to us. I'm hearing that from most districts in the area. They have the same challenge.
Same rules then for quarantine and close contact?
Yes, yeah, so once masks are off,
and that's why we're
inside 6 feet
encouraging
is a
the quick
close
turnaround.
contact, yeah.
Okay.
So if students are sitting at lunch, masks off for more than 15 minutes, within 6 feet of each other, they do become close contacts at that stage. So this is these are problems we will be continuing to solve clear as we come up to the year. But I can tell you we have communication out about where we are and being really just being really upfront with people about what we can accomplish, what we can is going to be important as we go. So, but what I also will remind you is that all of these mitigation strategies are layers that work together to help us keep this down in our schools. And we had tremendous success in the spring keeping it down. And I expect us to have excellent success again in the fall. The challenge will be, we will have cases come into the school, and to expect zero transmission is also unrealistic. So what we're all seeking to do is minimize it as much as possible and have our nurses ready to support throughout this process. Want to shift briefly to some work we started at our July workshop, and that was to say, okay, we just ended a 5-year strategic plan, now what? And saying, what does it look like going forward? Do we go through another 5-year strategic planning process? And we had a discussion about developing something that would identify our clear goals. And so this is a draft. What I'm showing you is not a finished product, but a draft at this stage. And we'll keep getting better at it. And so I wanted to give you a general sense. This is the next step from what we were doing. And that is to put in something that would say, here's what we're about. And it's based on the goals that we'd set in the spring. And we've identified a few different goals that we've been working on naming. And so this, I showed this to you previously. Now what we've come to is really identifying that as around instructional excellence, which is challenging all of our students and preparing them with skills to succeed in life beyond graduation. Systems of support, which is creating welcoming and school and district culture where students' social and emotional needs are met. And then fiscal stewardship, where we manage and protect our public funds and assets through efficient and effective use of our resources. And all of that is underscored by this focus on educational equity, which is really about saying, how do we make sure that we're increasing the achievement of all of our students, while at the same time closing the gaps between different groups to make sure that you can't predict a student's chance of success by their family's income, by their race, by their gender, or any other distinguishing characteristic. Those shouldn't be, I mean, kids aren't always all going to perform the same, but it shouldn't be predictable based upon any of those factors. So this is kind of what we're putting in place as a framework. And our intent would be then to set goals in those areas to help move our work forward, monitor those goals on an annual basis to say, how are we doing? Are we making progress? And we can always adjust these pillars if we determine at some point that they should be. But wanted to give you an update on where that is in process and how we're getting ready to move forward. So curious about any questions or thoughts you have related to that.
Any questions for Dr. Dotson?
So it's starting to become something more formed, and looking forward to getting down a little deeper into that. But wanted to let you know we continue to move forward with this work, and we'll continue to start to share this out as we feel like we've got it in final form. Want to share with you one of those goals is around equity, and just want to give you a quick update on something coming up that you have the opportunity to be a part of if you're interested or see. At Tumwater U next Monday in the afternoon, we actually will begin some equity training for our staff. Or we've done some training before, but we're going to have a staff-wide equity training led by Jamad Conley from Potential Unlimited. And that will be from 12:30 to 3:30 on Monday. And if any of you are interested, we'll certainly give you the link so that you would have the opportunity to join our staff for that training. And just to give you a sense of what, so Jamad Conley and Potential Unlimited, I was familiarized with them through regional superintendent's trainings last year, where he was really sharing, doing some training for superintendents around cultural competence, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and was really impressed with the approach he brought. And one of the things that, I'll just give you a sampling of what he will be sharing with our staff. As he start this work, Jamad really believes in beginning by framing this around a set of what he calls both and lenses. And if you've seen these before, they're not unique to this, but he does a much better job of explaining them than I will. But I'm just going to sample one for you as a way of seeing part of what they'll share. Both and lenses are around a couple of principles that tend to sometimes where we will fixate on one or the other and see these as either or. And when we see them as either or issues, we tend to go to our corners and have a harder time working together to solve problems. But if we start to see them as both and together, it can help us come together. So, for example, intent and impact is the first one of those lenses that he'll share about. And since we've engaged in some equity work together, we've talked about that idea of my intent isn't always the same as my impact. I might say something with a really positive intention, and the impact can be really negative on another person. If I hyperfixate on intent, I could say, well, I said something that was offensive or upsetting to you. I didn't mean for it to be offensive, so you shouldn't be upset about that. And that can start to divide us. On the flip side, it's very easy on the impact side for me to say, if someone says something to me that bothers me, to say that bothered me, and I don't really care what your intent was. It doesn't matter. It bothered me, and that can start to be a dividing concept as well. But when we see it as, when we begin to see it as a both and, what we see is a person can have positive intent and at the same time have a negative impact. And when I'm speaking to others or when I'm taking actions that affect others, that can help me be more aware that when I speak or act, I need to not only think about what my intent is, but also be understanding of how I might impact other people. And on the flip side of that, when someone is acting or speaking in a way that impacts me, when I'm impacted poorly, I can be more understanding and more forgiving if I understand that a person's intent might not be the way it hit me. And this is just a both and lens. When we start to come there, we can come out of our corners and start to communicate better. We can start to work together more effectively. And so he's going to spend time with staff on a set of 8 of those. And those can really help us as we come into equity work, do so when we have very different perspectives, and come at that in a way where we're able to see each other's points of view and and engage in equity work effectively together. So really looking forward to that discussion. And I just, if Jamad were here, he'd say, no, Sean, there's a much better way of putting that than what you just did. But hopefully that just gives you a sense of that. So if you have the opportunity, join us. It will be, I think, a really good start off. And yes?
They'll all be Zoom in sessions?
Yes. Those will be Zoom in sessions.
Okay.
Our staffs will, the way it'll be is he'll be doing this, and there'll be some activities our staffs will be taking part in, where there might be some discussion at buildings or in groups. So you may see some pauses and comebacks in that, but you'll have the opportunity to really see the essence of that training. And as follow-up, ESD 113 has developed a cultural competence, diversity, equity, and inclusion training series that actually is using the same team, the same consultants to create that curriculum. And I've participated in some of that curriculum previously. It's really well done. And we're going to have our staff throughout the year with some act times, some of our act times actually participating in activities using those, a 5-module series that will extend on what we learn at Tumwater U. And because we're working with Jamad some this year in that training, our intent is to meld both those online modules and some of the in-person trainings or synchronous trainings, live trainings that Jamad might run to really give our staff a seamless experience where we leave with a common foundation and background for for improving educational equity in our schools and really making our schools a welcoming place for all students. Because as you heard one of our speakers tonight, the concern is how do we make sure every kid feels welcomed and cared for in our schools? And that has to be one of our priorities. And I think every parent who sends their child to school, what they want is, they want to know my child is safe, my child is cared for, my child is respected, my child is welcomed. And that has to be one of our beginning points for moving forward. So staff will be able to receive clock hours for participating, and we're thinking now about what are opportunities for extension and differentiation, because not everyone's in the same place in this work. So while we need to give people a common foundation, there's also that there are people who may want to extend and study further, and we want to have those opportunities. So that's the work in progress right now. So any questions there? And that's what I have for you tonight for the superintendent report.
Great. Thank you, Sean. So now we'll move on to board comments. Please keep in mind that Melissa is not physically present, so you get as much time as you want tonight. Who would like to go first?
Excuse me, I can still time from California.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What?
I'll go first. If
Okay.
nobody's jumping to do it, I will go. First, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming here tonight, whether you were physically here with us or in Zoom land. Thank you very much for expressing your opinions, your statements, your stories. All are very important to me as a fellow parent here in Tumwater. So I thank all of you for doing that. And I think it's just extremely important, as I said earlier, about communication. We don't move forward or do anything in life greatly without exceptional communication. So let's keep doing that. And thank you again for all of your opinions, stories, and statements. Much appreciated. Second, I would also like to thank our district leaders for being here. Mel, Jennifer, Sean, and Sean. Thank you all for your work you're doing. It is a tough time we're going through right now, and we're all working very, very hard to get things safe for all of our children. And as Sean so eloquently put, we are here to serve our children, to make sure they are comforted, cared for, respected, and get the best education that we possibly can give them. So thank you to everybody. And Becky, too. I want to leave you out. And then finally, I would just like to say, again, as a parent here in Tumwater Schools, we came from Olympia. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again so everybody knows. Tumwater School District is an excellent school district. We have felt cared for and welcomed when we came here. And I just want to say that going forward, it's important that we all remember that we're all in this together. And if we don't stay together and pull together, then we're not going to have this amazing community. And I just want to remember that, because we are all in this together. And finally, I just want to also say that I'm happy to talk to any parent, community member. I say this every time, but please reach out to me. You can reach me on my website. You can email me. I'm happy to talk. I answer emails. I really, really do. And going forward, if that's something you want to do or reach out to me, I would really love it if you would. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sale. Who'd like to go next? Melissa, you want to go next?
I can go next. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can. 2 minutes.
Yeah, you'll only give me 90 seconds. I'm sorry I can't be there, but I am happy that I can attend over Zoom. So I agree with, oh, are you going to put me on screen? So I'm in Los Angeles right now, bringing my baby to school. And so that's on my mind right now. And I just want to remind us, as we are getting ready for school, that what we do is should prepare kids to go out in the world. And my kiddo feels prepared to go out into the world, not just by my doing, but also the education she's had at Tumwater schools. And I am thankful that we're preparing our kiddos to go wherever they want to go, and not just all going to college, all going to trade school or whatever, but we're preparing them to go out into the world. And I just want to thank our staff for their part in my daughter's preparation, and that we are doing this for everyone. And I just want to remind us that while it gets hard, our kids appreciate it. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Director Beard. Scott, you want to go ahead?
That was quick. All right, so I have three. One, it's now public knowledge that I am a grandfather of a future granddaughter. We found out this weekend that I have a baby girl. So that's pretty cool. Our first grandchild, who will be going to Tumwater School District. Second, a big shout out to the Together golf tournament today. It was absolutely phenomenal. Logistically was spot on, and I cannot believe how much it has grown that was 2 years ago, wasn't it, when you and I teamed up?
Yep.
It is amazing. The number of holes that are sponsored, the number of people that are out there at their sponsorship site, all the swag that they're handing out, I was floored. It was an amazing, amazing afternoon. So, huge shout out to them. And now, on a more serious note, so I have been toiling with this for months, like 18. So this is not coming lightly. So I prepared a statement just to make sure I stay on point. So, the community often asks for our position on topics, asks us. The requests primarily come to the board through email, public comment, or community engagement. I would like to provide my position on students wearing masks in our schools. My position is mine and mine alone. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. The other members of the board may not be prepared at this point to provide their position on mask wearing, and we need to respect that. My position is I'm going to follow the science and our medical community. Along with other mitigating measures, scientists and the medical community have made it clear that the best way to slow and possibly stop the spread of the virus is to wear masks, especially when vaccinated and unvaccinated populations are mixing. Evidence including vetted data, case studies that are cited by scientists help me arrive at and continue to shape my position. In contrast, shouting at me, cornering me in public, or providing hearsay and opinion is not going to change my position. As I stated during our previous board meeting, I'm very thankful that we have had civil conversations, and I truly, truly hope that continues going forward. I'm always open to, like Lori said, we're always open to conversations, as long as those conversations stay civil and we act accordingly. I am a processor, which means I need time. So if you have data, if you have case studies, by all means, email it to me, scott.killo@tumwater.k12.wa.us, so that I can read it, process it, digest it, and have a chance to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Killow. Darby, you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to do something similar to Scott. I'm going to draw a little bit deep. Look here. So, as Scott mentioned, you know, we oftentimes do get asked for our opinion on things, and lately a lot of this discussion has focused on school boards and their role and authority. What I'd like to share this evening is my guiding principle, so again, mine and my own, that is most core to my approach to fulfilling my duty as a school board director, which I'm going to draw on from reading the first paragraph of the Board of Directors Policy 1000 Legal Status and Operation. The Board of Directors of the Tumwater School District is the corporate entity established by the state of Washington to plan and direct all aspects of the district's operations to ensure quality in the content of the district's educational program and provide students with an opportunity to achieve those skills recognized as requisite to learning. I started on this board in December of 2019, so I was here in March of 2020. I imagine that board of directors pre-pandemic likely had a different experience and perspective about what this policy means in practice. Throughout the past year, I learned things about the human condition in the realm of public education operations through a pandemic that I never imagined would ever be something a school board member would grapple with. The one thing that impacted me the most, that I lost the most sleep over, caused the most stomach aches, headaches, pick your stress manifestation was, I was absolutely terrified that we were going to lose a kid, and not to COVID, to a mental health crisis. The volume of public comments, casual conversation comments, emails, news articles, etc., that we received from parents, teachers, community members, students, and finally, the healthcare community, urging, begging, pleading, in some cases through tears at us to open schools because kids were suffering and failing through remote operations is indescribable. I wholeheartedly agreed with the dire need to get kids back into the buildings, and it was proven how important this was when after we did open, the things I heard people say shifted to grades immediately went up. It's like a completely different kid. I can see the sparkle in her face again. He's doing great. She is so happy, on and on and on. So my opinion and basis for decision making on how this board policy is implemented is simple. Act in a way that ensures every single child has the opportunity for full-time in-school learning with their teachers, their friends, and their peers. We have an obligation to the families of this district to operate in accordance with that outcome, to provide that opportunity, especially to those without the privilege of other options. That quality of content and follow all the rules that just have to come along with it, so long as we are in a pandemic and a public health crisis. As Tumwater School Board Director and steward of this policy, I will not under any circumstances ever take any action that threatens or compromises that fundamental right to a high-quality education for our #1 constituent, our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kaikkonen. Okay, I will finish up real quick, I hope here. I would like to thank the 6 individuals that gave us feedback on the budget and policy. I don't think that's really happened before much. Yeah. I know Sean pointed that out, and that is a big thing, and I was actually very happy to read through their comments. As always, I like hearing back from the community, specifically tonight. Tara, Courtney, Dave, and Catherine, thank you very much. Your words were heard, I can promise you. I'll touch on what Darby and Scott said real quick. I think we're going to do what's the best interest of the kids. However, our hands are severely tied with what we can do by a governor. So the local control has really taken it away. So we can act within that box, but our hands are tied much more than they've ever been. So that needs to be drawn out. And I think Lance's words earlier, a lot of this conversation does belong at a state level. That's where it needs to change. It is ridiculous to have an emergency order still 500, 600 days at least, 700 or 800 until they actually pass something maybe next legislature. That is severely limiting the ability of this board to take any local control. And I'll end with that. So thank you for attending. With no further business, the regular meeting is adjourned at 7:36 p.m. and now we are going to go into closed session. Is that correct, Sean? That's correct. So we will go into closed session and we will come back.
We don't need to come back.
We don't need to come back on closed. Okay, so we are done and the board meeting is over. Thank you everyone for attending.